This is Yulia Stepanova, her husband Vitaly, and their son Robert. A film on ARD German TV had already opened with them half a year ago. At that time, hardly anyone knew them. Today, they're well known in the sports world. As key witnesses, the Stepanovs provided evidence of systematic doping in Russian athletics, as comprehensive as none before. They were acclaimed by many. For many others, they became enemies. But they have no regrets.
Everyone who was in this system, generation after generation, kept quiet. Nobody spoke about it because they'd come to terms with it.
I'm okay if somebody says that I'm a traitor. If I'm seen as a traitor of a doping system, of a traitor of a Russian doping system, I'm okay with this.
The Stepanovs wanted to make athletics cleaner. But has it become truly clean? Moscow, the home of Yulia and Vitaly Stepanov, until they went public with their disclosures, and as a result, hit the headlines worldwide. For their key witness report from the innermost areas of Russian athletics was sensational. Yulia, the top runner, and Vitaly, the former employee of the Russian anti-doping agency, with their statements and secret audio and video recordings, revealed a doping system the likes of which few would have thought possible. A system in which doctors, coaches, and athletes were all involved.
That's our system. In Russia, things only work with pharmaceuticals.
It's hammered into the coaches, and the coaches then hammer it into the athletes.
I clearly could see that the officials are trying to make sure that some athletes are not being tested.
It was about doping in Russian athletics, about cover-ups, and about corruption.
This time we should already pay 300,000 euros.
It was about officials who made excuses.
I'm the president, and I was never involved in anything.
And witnesses who were afraid.
When you talk about such things, it can be very dangerous. An accident can happen, do you understand?
What I'm doing here, the fact that I'm telling you all this, will probably make me public enemy #1 in Russia.
Some say this is the worst crisis athletics has ever faced, ever. Is that fair?
I think it's an opinion, yes. It is a difficult crisis, but we will put it behind us by cleaning all this. It's our job.
A few months later in my office, the film continues to have an effect. I've never received so many reactions, insults, encouragement, new pieces of evidence, and repeated questions. What has happened since then? The World Anti-Doping Agency has set up an independent commission of inquiry. The associations concerned have also declared that they would investigate the allegations. Important officials were dismissed or left voluntarily. For example, Valentin Balachnichev, the head of the Russian Athletics Federation, Valentin Maslakov, the head coach of the Russian national team, Gabriel Dolé, the anti-doping commissioner of the World Athletics Federation IAAF, and Papa Masata Diak, marketing consultant and son of the president of the IAAF. And it also affected athletes.
Olympischer Rekord. Die Weltmeisterin, die Goldmedaillengewinnerin, Weltmeisterin aus Russland.
In the course of the film, dozens of suspensions were pronounced on Russian athletes. The Russian Federation has announced the withdrawal of the entire walking team from international competitions. However, even today, Russian athletics coaches describe my research as lies, refuse to make any statements to the ARD. All of that does not really seem to fit together. How consistent is Russia in its reappraisal of the scandal? Time for new research. It starts once again with the Stepanovs. I want to know what has happened to them since then. We arranged to meet somewhere in Austria. We're supposed not to say where exactly, for safety reasons. Personally, as a result of their revelations, the two of them have had trouble. They had to leave Russia. Neither of them has a job. Yulia Stepanova in particular is repeatedly vilified by officials and journalists from their home country.
Журналист Наталья Калугина пишет: «Мразь, девка, просто мразь, мразь». Сумею сформулировать так, чтобы оно было ясно. Девка, мразь. It is unfortunate that it was so mostly negative, and it seems that nobody really wants to look deep inside the problem and try to solve the problem. Everyone just blames us and saying that we are liars and traitors.
I think if we'd stayed in Russia, we wouldn't have been safe. I'm assuming there are people who want to take revenge on us. I'm thinking particularly of our well-being and our health. They could incite someone or pay them. There are many ways to get revenge.
The Stepanovs don't know how things will work out for them. Abroad, first of all, at least they feel safe. Other informants from my last film are still in Russia. Some of them have been put under pressure, I hear. But only a few still want to talk openly about it. I set off for the Caucasus, 1,500 kilometers south of Moscow. Mineralnie Vody. Here I have an appointment for an interview. During my previous research, Evgenia Pecherina had expressed the opinion that the majority of Russian athletes were doping. In Russia, many people resented her saying that. She invites me to come in. But then she says that she would rather not give an interview after all. She had been threatened. Then she breaks off contact. Back in Berlin, I get a message. An email with attachments. Apparently secret recordings of Russian athletes, unedited and in full length. They're genuine.
How did you prepare for this season?
A runner on the Russian national team is asked.
I've taken EPO.
The voice is that of Russian runner Tatyana Myazina, bronze medal winner only a few months ago in the Relay World Championships. And there's another recording.
We stopped using EPO.
And then she adds,
My coach gave me a course.
Course usually means doping with steroids.
He sells it to us at high prices, so I had just 7 pills and took them, and I was faster than his other female athletes.
It's the voice of runner Kristina Ugarova, also a member of the national team. None of the athletes in the recordings has ever been caught out in a drug test, but there are some of them who already attracted my attention in previous research. An extract from an interview.
Parabolan is detectable possibly for 10 to 15 days.
And she says about an EPO brand.
Epicrine you should take for years.
Another voice asks,
Did you prepare on HGH?
Yes.
Isn't it detectable?
It is for 3 or 4 days.
The 2012 800-meter Olympic gold medalist Maria Savinova. Following the previous film, she denied all the allegations. Just like her coach, who can be seen with her here, Vladimir Kazarin. At that time, I showed how he distributed pills to athletes. He too can be heard on previously unheard recordings.
We have only oxandrolone and primobolan, and in the early stage it's just a little. You can do a few ampoules of EPO, of course.
Just a little? So the levels don't rise too high?
Yes, yes, yes.
But is it still effective?
Yes, of course. At least the way you work can still get a bit better.
March 2015. The European Indoor Championships. It's the most important athletics event for Europe's top athletes before the World Championships this year. It goes very well again for Russia. The Russian athletes dominate. But is it also really clean? I look around and want to know whether the Russian Federation has left suspected coaches like Kazarin at home. In the stands, I cannot see any of them. There, where our cameras have no access, an insider is filming. In the warm-up area, with a cell phone. And there, alongside two Russian runners, he is, Vladimir Kazarin, the seriously incriminated coach. Apparently, he is still active behind the scenes. And who are his two athletes? One is the world-class 800-meter runner Anastasia Bazdireva. She's regarded as a great Russian Olympic hope for Rio 2016. A video leaked to me shows her in winter.
I will ask how long the substance is detectable.
Another person asks,
What other pharma were you telling me about?
Parabolan. From anabolic steroids, I get stiff muscles, but I can run on it. It's difficult, but I can do it. You feel differently from anabolic steroids.
the second athlete in the warm-up area, Ekaterina Poistogova, also a top 800-meter runner. In Prague, she reaches the final. Beaten only by 1/100th of a second, she wins silver. For me, she's an old acquaintance. I know her from my last researches.
10 oxandrolone tablets, that's enough.
Her training partner asks her about other doping substances.
What about peptides?
We tried them in 2013.
It's almost spooky. The women's 800 meters, a favorite event of the Russians that is now under general suspicion. The Olympic bronze medalist in the competition, Ekaterina Poistogova. The great Olympic hope for Rio 2016, Anastasia Bazdireva. The reigning Olympic champion, Marina Savinova. And her coach, the most successful 800-meter coach in the world, Vladimir Kazarin. I now have secret recordings of all of them, in which they say they worked with doping substances. And by the way, the Russian Federation has so far also not publicly distanced itself from the other strongly suspected officials. The man here, for example, Sergei Portugalov, longtime head of the Federation's medical department.
You really reacted greatly the last time, as if you had had a turbo installed.
And the man he's speaking to, head coach Alexei Melnikov.
We have to make sure we don't repeat our mistakes. We have to be more careful now.
When asked what role they still play today, we get no response from the Russian Federation. And also from all other persons shown, when asked, none has commented on the allegations, whether backers or athletes. In Russia, many doping offenders are apparently not pursued. Why don't the doping investigators in sport catch them? I get possible explanations for this from an informant. Confidential records, so-called athlete profiles. All top athletes worldwide must provide details of their whereabouts in the next quarter in a database for the doping control officers. As a result, unannounced doping tests are possible at any time as stipulated. I can see Russian track and field athletes have frequently not indicated where they're residing, not submitted, no details, right up to 2015. Thus, dopers can evade controls. The Russian anti-doping agency Rusada can impose sanctions on athletes if they repeatedly fail to declare their whereabouts. But how often that happens Rusada is not saying anything about that. A telephone recording makes me even more suspicious. On it, an announcement of a test by an inspector on behalf of the IAAF. She asks an athlete,
"Can you come to Komsomolskaya metro station so we can do the test there?"
An inspector from Rusada simultaneously provides the athlete with a time slot.
We can perform the test anytime before October.
Announced doping tests. Normally, that would be a violation of the anti-doping regulations and would open the floodgates to fraud. In response to our question, the World Athletics Federation informs us that all violations of the rules would be investigated. And the Russian anti-doping agency Rusada? In public, up to now, it's rejected all accusations as groundless. It doesn't reply to my specific questions. This lady is on the supervisory board of Rusada, Svetlana Zhurova. She's a member of the Duma and a former athlete. Was Olympic champion in speed skating in 2006. At the Winter Games in Sochi, the official proudly presented the medals. At the beginning of the year, she spoke publicly in a Russian magazine about the anti-doping fight of Rusada. Hardly noticed, but remarkable. The supervisory board of Rusada also have to consider state interests, she says there. And
the national team members are informed before doping controls take place. They're always carried out before the athletes travel to international championships.
Zhurova also describes what happens after that.
If there's evidence of doping, the coach can keep the athletes at home or treat them individually until, by the time of the competition, the banned substances are neutralized.
In other words, doped athletes are protected by the anti-doping agency of Russia rather than suspended. I inquired at Rusada if they actually understood that as being their task. No reply. But Zhurova must probably have meant that. She even publicized the interview on Twitter herself. In the meantime, the entry has been deleted. Suspected dopers who continue to go to the start, incriminated coaches who continue to work in the background, athletes who are untraceable for doping testers, and a representative of the anti-doping agency who apparently sees her responsibility being to protect dopers against suspensions. I experienced all of that this time in Russia. Lausanne, seat of the International Olympic Committee. An independent commission of inquiry of the World Anti-Doping Agency examines all statements and documents on which this and the previous film are based. I want to know what the state of the investigations is, and have a meeting with Dick Pound, chairman of the commission. He's confirmed the authenticity of the material, accepted it as evidence, and wants to present results soon.
If all of the facts that we're beginning to investigate turn out to be true, then clearly the problem is bigger than anybody's ever admitted and bigger than the public at large would understand. I mean, there's a public perception, there's a failure to protect honest athletes. There's probably been economic fraud because there's a lot of prize money in some of these events. It would be a major, major difficulty for athletics to overcome, and they would have to be very conscious of the fact that their sport would be in difficulty if they don't find a solution.
Vitaly Stepanov and his wife Yulia. They've made many of the revealing recordings. For them, it was the right decision. Now it's up to others what will be done with the evidence. Both hope that something will change, even though many in Russia still deny what is actually clearly proven.
It seems that nobody inside of Russia really wants to change anything, and our goal was to bring attention to WADA and to other big sports organizations.
What most disappointed me after the appearance of the previous film was to see that people aren't able to admit their guilt. They've been caught in the act, and they still don't cease to deny everything. They're shown evidence, and they simply say, that's not proof. How dishonest and unscrupulous can people be?
For me, above all, there's one question. What is it like elsewhere in the world where there are no such key witnesses like Yulia Stepanova and her husband Vitaly? Does it operate there much like it does in Russia? A couple of days later, I get unusual post. A letter, no return address. In it, a data stick. A folder with the name IAAF and several files. It's a database. Hundreds of pages, with names of athletes from all over the world, and with their blood counts. Apparently the results of blood tests that might provide evidence of doping. If this data is genuine, it would be highly explosive. If it is genuine, I must check that. I discussed the matter with longtime confidants who are familiar with such data.
Did you check the values? Yeah, okay. What was your result? Okay.
And indeed, several insiders independently confirm it. The database seems to come directly from within the World Athletics Federation IAAF. What a document. More than 12,000 official blood tests, around 5,000 athletes. World champions, Olympic champions, in all disciplines. Beginning in 2001, right through to 2012. How complete it is, I cannot see exactly. But it's clear to me. It's the largest database of blood values of elite athletes which has ever been revealed outside. And I see immediately, some values are remarkably high, look suspiciously like blood doping. If I analyze this database, I could get closer to an answer to the question of how widespread doping is in athletics than ever before. Therefore, I set off on my way to London. It will perhaps be the most comprehensive doping research that I've ever done. The database is huge. It would be impossible for me to evaluate it on my own. I've arranged a meeting with British colleagues from the Sunday Times. They've published a lot of great stories in sports and have experience in analyzing large amounts of data. The colleagues are immediately interested and willing to participate in my research. And they have a team of data specialists which goes to work immediately. We immediately notice, in the database there are not only the blood levels of many Russian athletes, but also of many Kenyans. Kenya, the home of the world's best long-distance runners. Some of them just happen to be currently in London. The world-famous London Marathon. The Kenyans dominate, take the first 4 places, with top times as every year. I ask myself, why are they all so damned quick? And set off on my way to Kenya.
Welcome aboard, ladies and gentlemen. This aircraft is headed to Eldoret International Airport.
Eldoret in West Kenya. In the highlands, 2,100 meters above sea level, ideal conditions for the training of endurance athletes. My driver takes me to a little village, 1.5 hours drive away from Eldoret. I've learned that a marathon runner who comes from here has died. According to the rumors, he took EPO. His grave is in the family garden. Jeffrey Tarnow was just 32 years old. He died in a marathon in Eldoret in October 2013. There you could win prize money of up to $3,000. For the people who live here, where there is neither electricity nor running water, a huge sum of money. After 40 kilometers, he was still leading. Then he collapsed. Jeffrey Tarnow left 4 children and his wife.
After his death, I lost all hope. It really hurts a lot to think back. I always think he'll return. But every day when I see his grave in front of the door, I realize he'll never come back into our lives. Since his death, I have no more hope.
We struggle a lot. I myself, I don't have any job. I go and weed somebody's farm so that I can get small money to pay my children and for Geoffrey's school fees for the 2 they have remained. Geoffrey was actually our breadwinner.
And I remember even his neighbor here, he had promised that when I come back, you will be very happy. I'm going for this race, but when I come back, I will be richer than ever before.
Jeffrey Tarnow had not only fed his family, he supported the whole village community with the income from his competitions. The cause of his sudden death is still unclear. I start searching for clues. Which cause of death did the doctors find? I managed to see the autopsy report of the Kenyan police. It states, Jeffrey Tarnow died from the consequences of a blood clot, a thrombus. This led to a pulmonary embolism and to sudden death, writes the pathologist Dr. Chumba. It reminds me of the cases of death of young cyclists in the 90s following EPO injections. Is that still happening here today? I make an appointment with Dr. Chumba. The fact that EPO can lead to clotting of blood is well known. I want to know from Dr. Chumba whether he also sees this connection in the case of Jeffrey Tarnow.
It is very risky to use in a patient who already has exerting so much, the heart is already large, and continue to use EPO, it will be very risky.
I make contact with Jeffrey Tarnow's former teammates and receive more and more evidence. One of his closest training partners at the time can remember well. Since he's still running professionally today, he does not want to be identified.
He trained a lot, but he never won. Almost every day, he told me, if he got doping substances, he'd take them. He spoke of tablets and injections. I found out he injected the agent himself. For a few weeks, a woman always visited training. Every one of us knew she sold the drugs. 3 days before the competition, they left the sports ground together. After our last training together, he said, I must win the race, no matter how, if not, I'll die. That suddenly he ran so fast in the marathon was not normal. After Jeffrey had died, the woman never came back.
That sounds clear, but it's still not enough for me. I've been in contact with several other Kenyan runners for quite some time. They know that I'm researching this case. They sent me a secret recording of a doctor who, as they tell me, provides athletes with doping substances and who appears to know the case.
The guy who died in the marathon in Eldoret had got his injection too early. The blood values were too low. They'd forgotten to give him enough iron in advance. And then his heart stopped beating. He collapsed and died.
He means Jeffrey Tarnow. Everything indicates that he died as a result of taking EPO. Hundreds of thousands in Kenya are trying to make ends meet for themselves and their families through running. Only a very few make it to the top. Doping can make the difference between poverty and prosperity. How widespread is doping among Kenya's runners? I've made an appointment with an insider who knows the scene. He doesn't want to be identified because he's worked as a coach for a world-class athlete. 3 years ago, when I first reported on doping in Kenya, he told me that the extent of doping will increase. And now?
Things are continuing just the same way. The young runners find out what the best runners do, and then they want the same. The big fish pull the little fish after them. This has been going on like this in Kenya for 10 years now. But now more is being revealed about it. The runners go to the doctors, who they believe are doping the top runners, and the doctors see how they can profit from it, and they say, if you want to be faster, then you have to take that.
Whether that's true, I want to know, and to find doctors who dope. For cover, I pass myself off as a manager. I have enough cash with me. Meeting with a European amateur runner. He knows his stuff because he himself regularly takes EPO. To get it is quite simple, he says, and he's not afraid to show it to me. He only wants to remain anonymous. Then he takes me to a doctor in Eldoret in the center of town. I record with a hidden camera. I ask him if he has many customers.
I work together with many athletes.
And what do the athletes achieve as a result?
They produce really good performances.
He disappears into the next room and returns with 2 packs. One is EpoFit, a known doping preparation that increases stamina. And the other, Sustanon, one of the most effective anabolic steroids of all. It ensures an enormous gain in strength. The athlete from Europe opts for EPO, the classic for endurance athletes.
Do you want to send your athletes to me? No problem. I'll treat your athletes well. And what about him here? Does he need more EPO? Tell me about his dates, when the competitions are scheduled, so that he does not end up in a doping control.
The doctor also mentions the name of an Olympic champion who he claims to have treated. Whether that is true, I cannot check. How many doctors of this kind there are, I wonder. On my way to the Kenyan runners, with whom I've been in contact for several weeks. Doping, they tell me, is quite normal for them. And if I protect their identity, they could lead me to more physicians who administer the doping substances. I record once again with a hidden camera. They use their mobile phones. The athletes ask for injections, especially for EPO or testosterone. Recordings made at different locations, recorded within a period of just a few days. Large freezers, suitable, for example, for the cooling of stocks of EPO. Here again, some of the doctors suggest that some of their customers are top athletes. Whether that's just showing off or the truth, I cannot verify. During the research in Kenya, the colleagues from the Sunday Times keep me up to date about their research results. In the meantime, they've statistically evaluated the database of blood values. There are indeed many abnormal items of data. For about 1 out of 7 athletes, they've found values which for 99% of all athletes could not be explained naturally. In some countries, almost half the athletes have shown abnormal blood values. The World Athletics governing body, IAAF, has not commented on this in detail. It simply says,
We doubt the basis and the validity of your statistical investigation. Blood doping cannot be determined on the basis of a single abnormal value.
It's a fact that we cannot prove doping among athletes through our evaluation, but we do have an indication of how widespread doping is. The IAAF even admits that it has collected similar results in the past. They claim to have responded with new analytical instruments. Among the Kenyans, there are few positive doping tests. They've been dominating the middle and long-distance events for years. More than half of all the titles in these events have been won by Kenyans in the past 10 years. The rest of the world, mainly with no chance.
Auf dem Weg zum Weltrekord. Unfassbar.
In the marathon world best list, there are 230 Kenyans before the first German. Kenya's Athletics Federation, one of the most successful in the world. In ARD Studio Nairobi, we meet the world-class marathon runner Rita Jepto. As one of few, she is tested positive. Last year, she still won the famous Boston Marathon.
20:43, and she's got it.
Shortly afterwards, in a urine test, she was found guilty of EPO doping.
The fastest woman to ever run from Hopkinton to Boston.
Today, she is suspended. Up to her suspension, she was one of the world's best for 10 years. What interests me is how intensively she'd been tested in all those years in Kenya.
I have experience. I'm an athlete since 2006, and I've never since tested blood in Kenya. The test only in Kenya it was only urine. Since when I'm running in Kenya, no blood test. Never.
Not a single blood test in Kenya since 2006. That's how easy it's made for dopers. If you want to dope effectively, as a rule, you don't do it in competition, but before that, in training. If no blood tests take place, it's easier to get away with it. That could be a reason why elite athletes, should they dope, are rarely caught. Maybe there are other reasons too. Documents have been leaked to me. Documents that you do not often get your hands on, a positive doping test. It belongs to the Kenyan marathon runner Viola Chelangat Kimeto from December 1, 2013. Accompanied by a confidential letter from the IAAF to the leadership of the Kenyan Federation. 1 month later, it states, the marathon runner Viola Chelangat Kimeto was doped and must be suspended immediately. The letter bears the signature of the then doping commissioner of the IAAF. What that means is quite clear. Viola Chelangat Kimeto should be suspended and should not participate in any competition worldwide. But after 9 months, she suddenly appears again. In a marathon in Zagreb, Croatia, in October 2014, although the Kenyan Federation knows that she tested positive. And strangely, there's an official letter which proves the Kenyan Federation has granted her official permission to participate in the competition, signed by the Federation's management. Viola Chelangat Kimeto, far left, even manages to finish on the podium in Zagreb. She finishes third, although she should never have been allowed to start because of doping. Why did the Kenyan Federation allow her to start? The Kenyan Federation leaves my inquiries unanswered. Kimeto is only suspended. When the unauthorized start becomes known to the IAAF months later, there are rumors that athletes in Kenya can buy start releases. I want to know more about it and start asking around. After a few days, I make contact to 2 athletic coaches. They know what they're talking about, have often had dealings with the Athletics Federation, Athletics Kenya. They claim,
I have stayed with those people since 2011. In relation to doping, they test young, upcoming athletes, those who do have money. Those who have money are set free. They take bribes from them.
wanawachilia labda wanahitaji ongo kutoka wao. Kwa hiyo maneno ya doping kweli wengi wamenaswa.
In this doping issue, truly many have been caught. If you have a manager and you've been caught when results come out, they are first taken to Athletics Kenya, who will call you.
If someone has been found to have doped, it works like this. If it is a lady, she'll be told, "We found drugs in your test." But if someone asks you, you have to say, "It was a drug for my family planning." The president would talk with doctors, and then they clear everything.
So, our mama, our daktari usema anaongea na yeye mwenyewe na daktari ndiye anamaliza hiyo maneno. Sasa anamaliza na daktari.
So they deduct your money. For example, if you win 20,000 euros, they deduct around 10,000 euros, so that the doping issue will not be known.
I cannot verify what they tell me. However, both confirm in writing that they are telling the truth. Of course, we also asked Athletics Kenya for its opinion. No answer. Our witnesses' accusations against the Federation are serious, and also against him. The longtime president Isaiah Kiplagat. He's not only the most powerful sports official in Kenya, he's also a heavyweight in the World Athletics Federation. He's currently campaigning for election as its vice president.
For the vice presidency of the IF.
It's his job to ensure clean sport, but in Kenya, many say that he himself is anything but clean. A few days later, I get an email from a Kenyan colleague. It has to do with payments from the sponsor Nike, money from supplier contracts, which officials had put into their own pockets. Thanks to the information, I get statements from an account of Athletics Kenya. In them, it can be seen, over years, large sums have flowed into the account of the Federation, quite officially. Hundreds of thousands, always from the sponsor Nike. But what is interesting, on a regular basis, shortly afterwards, large sums are taken out of the same account, in cash. Here, for example, $200,000 taken out by a certain David Okeyo, and then $100,000 taken out by Brenda. And later, $100,000 once again, this time withdrawn by Joseph Kenyua. It continues like that for several years. In total, a sum of at least $700,000 is involved, which were withdrawn in cash from the Federation's account, and not just by anyone. They're the names of the leadership of the Federation. Joseph Kenyua, the Treasurer. David Okeyo, the Secretary General. And President Isaiah Kiplagat. He's not listed. But his assistant is called Brenda. I've asked Athletics Kenya what is going on with the cash withdrawals. Once again, I didn't get an answer. But the criminal police confirmed to me that investigations of the officials are in progress. Doping athletes. Physicians who administer doping substances. An inadequate control system. Officials who seem to turn a blind eye to doping and appear to enrich themselves. All that in a desperately poor country where the majority of people lack even the basic necessities. Return flight to Germany. One question continues to bother me. What about the other countries? Doping is not limited to Russia and Kenya. And what role does the World Athletics Federation play? Does the IAAF really do everything to prevent doping? Back at my desk in Berlin, I take a look at the database with the blood values once again. Approximately every 7th athlete had abnormal values. I know that in the meantime, a large number, but I want to know more details. It's clear that these values refer to athletes from different disciplines. What if I were to concentrate on those which are particularly susceptible to blood doping? walking, and the running events from 800 meters to the marathon? And what if I focus the analysis on the top athletes? Would that drive the numbers up even further? A sensitive field. After all, it is a question of the best athletes in these disciplines. It's about medals, records, and prize money. I'm extremely cautious. In order to protect the privacy of these athletes, I decide to mention no names. The blood test results are explosive enough, and I choose to take 2 renowned scientists into my confidence.
Hajo Seppelt speaking, German television.
Identifying unusual values, that's their specialty. They agree to review the large volume of data professionally. Everything is agreed. The next morning, I send the data off to them. To Australia, where both live. On the east coast of Australia, the experts are among the leading scientists worldwide in the field of blood doping. They are Robin Parisotto and Michael Ashenden. Independently of each other, they begin analyzing the secret data and can hardly believe what they've got in front of them.
From the values in the database, there's no question in my mind that athletics world championships and Olympic distance events have been contaminated by blood doping. I feel deeply sorry for the genuine athletes who were cheated out of medals, because it would have been near impossible to compete against some of the blood values that I evaluated. Some results were simply grotesque. In their extremity, they were quite easily the worst I've ever seen.
I can honestly say that, I've never seen blood values to that extreme. There has been in the past the odd athlete in other sports that, have demonstrated similar data. But as a collective, there were so many in this database where the results were not only suspicious but downright extreme.
But how many athletes have suspicious values? And how many medal winners? I remain in contact with the experts. They evaluate the data now in even greater detail, with methods like those used by experts in official doping analyses. This takes time. Weeks go by. I need to exercise patience. Then a first report.
In the database, it wasn't just the medalists who had extreme blood values. If it's true there were a spate of deaths in professional cycling when EPO first appeared during the early 90s, then I worry that there may be a larger hidden trail of death in athletics. Some of the blood values were so extreme, so dangerous, it's obvious to me that EPO was used without any medical input. No medically trained advisor, in my view, would have permitted blood values to have been so elevated. It's indisputable that some of those athletes risk death from the complications caused by thickening of their blood.
And also the spread of doping is remarkable. The experts have taken a look at the medals won in endurance disciplines at World Championships and Olympic Games between 2001 and 2012. And they found that roughly every third one was won by athletes for whom at least one expert had identified a suspicious value. For every sixth was won by athletes who at least one expert judged even highly suspicious of having doped at some time in their career.
If the values in the database are correct, it reveals that at every World Championship and Olympic Games since Sydney 2000, medals have been won in at least one of the distance events by an athlete who at some point in their career had most probably engaged in blood doping. Now this holds true for both males and females. Often 2 out of the 3 medalists had probably engaged in blood doping during their career. In one event, the entire podium was comprised of athletes who, in my opinion, had most probably doped at some point in their career.
I take a look at how many of the medalists where our experts have discovered suspicious values of doping have been found guilty of doping, and I'm surprised. 2/3 of them remain unchecked. According to official IAAF documents, proceedings have only been initiated against 1/3 of them, or they've already been suspended. Of all doping tests made in athletics, as a rule, around 1% are positive. What is interesting, however, is that the share of the highly suspicious values in the database identified by our experts is many times higher. It would appear that, over all the years, only a fraction of the doping athletes had been caught.
The results are there. Someone has been collecting the results, someone must have overseen the results, but someone has decided not to take any action on many of those results. So to me, whoever within the IAAF and the various national federations is responsible for managing those results, they've obviously not done a very good job.
The World Athletics Federation informs me that without precise knowledge of the data files, they could not comment on the results and refutes any criticism on the management of results. Up to 2009, it was necessary to specifically prove prohibited substances. Simply on the grounds of blood values, it was impossible to suspend athletes. Since the introduction of the biological passport in 2009, although one can now do this, strict rules must be followed. Any other form of analysis would be speculation. Speculation on the part of the experts, or a lack of consistency by the Federation? The experts have worked as they would with official doping analyses. At least one of them identified almost 150 medals as suspicious. Just 4 have been withdrawn on grounds of doping. I wonder how widespread doping as a whole was in recent years, and compare the values from athletics in our database with those from cycling. And I am surprised. This line shows how many suspicious blood values, according to a study, there had been in cycling up to 2010. Applying the same criteria to our database, it's noticeable. The number of conspicuous values in several years was even higher than those in cycling. And whereas as of 2008 the blood values which suggested doping declined in cycling, in athletics they continued to rise after 2008.
Some extreme results in the database were collected in the past few years during the passport era. So it suggests to me that athletics is in the same diabolical position today that professional cycling was in 20 years ago.
To put it simply, the prevalence of blood doping in track and field is alarming, and despite fierce criticism, the sport of cycling in comparison has responded well to the challenge they faced back in the late 90s and early 2000s. That is what I think the challenge now that seems to be confronting the IAAF. So in terms of where they are probably 10 or 15 years behind cycling.
The World Athletics Federation likes to celebrate. Here, for example, at a gala in honor of the top athletes in the past year. And there's reason for it. The marketing is going well, especially in Olympic years. On average, in the last 4 years, the Federation has had annual income of around $58 million. For the fight against doping, most recently it has spent around $2.5 million per year.
For the IAAF to have harvested millions of dollars from the broadcasting of athletics competitions around the world, year after year, yet only devote a relative pittance of those funds towards anti-doping, when they must have seen the terrible truth of what lay beneath the surface, is, in my opinion, a shameful betrayal of their primary duty to police their sport and to protect their clean athletes.
The IAAF says it stands at the forefront in the fight against doping worldwide. And in the end, what sticks in my mind, doping in athletics seems to be much more widespread than the officials want to admit. Athletes are risking their lives. Suspected dopers have won medals on a grand scale, and many suspected dopers have got off scot-free. In a few weeks, the World Championships will begin in Beijing. It already seems clear. Once again, a shadow will be cast over the winners' lists.